Shaftesbury's German Wanderlust here on BBC4 tonight at 10 to 4, after we take a look at the evidence on an arresting hunt for the perfect TV detective.
There's been a murder. What fun. What better entertainment than a good TV detective story? Who done it, how, and where? But how do our small screen sleuths compare? Just who is the perfect TV detective? Put simply, a detective is someone who solves crime.
Exactly.
What body?
Who's been murdered?
I have to say, I haven't the faintest idea.
But 50 years of television have revealed more than a few variations on the theme. From the crime-fighting medieval monk Cadfael to the time-shifting sci-fi crime traveler. We've seen the rise of detective science in psychology and forensics, DNA. There have been detective cooks.
Oh, yes.
Housewives, ghosts.
Hello, Jeff.
What?
Even a phone-in detective.
Yes, our very own private eye. Shoestrings, the name.
You need to look at the landscape of detectives that already exist. We've got a huge surplus of TV detectives, and look at perhaps that one last pigeonhole that hasn't been filled. Perhaps he could be a butcher who's a detective. You know, perhaps he could be a cobbler who's a detective. Perhaps he could be a detective with Tourette's. I don't know. But think of something that hasn't been done already. That's not easy.
But wait. We haven't even mentioned the police detective.
Here's the man who stands between the general public and the forces of disorder, disorganization, anarchy, and crime.
And let me leave you with this thought. The future of the world is contained in a sandwich.
Yeah, whatever, John. But which of these deserves the title perfect? We've gathered the usual suspects, and over the next hour, we'll sift the evidence to see just who is favourite. It's a lineup of amateurs, professionals, and experts. The aim of the game is to visit 8 rooms and gather clues in 8 categories that will in the end reveal the perfect TV detective. He or she would need to have a distinctive character and memorable image, one that would distinguish him above the rank and file of the ordinary plot.
Image is very important to the TV detective because there has to be a certain kind of recognition factor. And I think that really the older your source for a TV drama, the more of an image you have to work with, because you can work with the history of the representation of that character.
When it comes to the classic image of the detective, we have to go back in time to Victorian England. Here is a character that has been played many times on stage and screen, but on television, arguably most effectively portrayed by Jeremy Brett.
But I believe you would have found some of the guests at my hotel most intriguing.
He was absolutely devoted to the stories when they went on screen being faithful representations from the book, from the literary side of it. And he would carry that book around with him on the set, and if the director or the writers departed at all from the story, he would want to know why. He was almost puritanical about that. But at the same time, he had a sense of humor about himself.
You It's serious.
The original pop culture icon has got to be Sherlock Holmes. Because there's this idea of him as being this character stalking around in this deer stalker and this long coat.
The very, very piercing eyes, the slick back hair, the air of absolute dedication.
Ah, Watson, it's a wicked world.
He's a very, very distinctive character.
You could probably go into the middle of the Gobi Desert and say Sherlock Holmes, and someone there would know who you were talking about. You might get it with Winston Churchill, you might get it with Shakespeare, but there are very few.
The way that he moves about is vampire-like.
These are Bates's footprints.
He's like a kind of weird supernatural heroin addict.
Watson, look at this.
Another detective character who's been played by many is Agatha Christie's Miss Marple. On film, it was Margaret Rutherford who claimed the classic image, but on TV, it is Joan Hickson's portrayal of the meddling busybody that is most memorable.
Miss Marple is a character I think you could probably recognise in silhouette.
Good morning, Inspector.
She's got the little hat, handbag that she clutches. Head on one side, wistful expression.
I've come to report a murder.
She can just sit in the background of scenes and overhear all different clues that are being given to her, mainly because no one in their right mind would expect a lovely little old lady with knitted cardigans to be one of the sharpest minds on the planet.
Good morning.
There's something kind of avian about her. She has a way of sort of whistling slightly to herself as she speaks, a way of thinking about things.
It's a mystery. Then we all are, aren't we? Even to ourselves.
She's terribly, terribly delicate. And that's the source of her power.
She's a total wolf in sheep's clothing, and literally a wolf in knitted sheep's clothing.
But more often than not, the image of the TV detective isn't flamboyant like Holmes.
March!
Or prim or knitted like Marple.
Oh dear, oh dear.
In fact, the most successful TV detectives are a bit scruffy, downtrodden, or world-weary even.
Right.
Exemplified by classic American Dick Columbo. Closer to home, we had our own version.
Taggart I loved with Manus, who looked weighed down with the oppressive nature of his work, the awfulness of his situation.
Massive subcutaneous internal contusions were observed.
Aye.
There was no possibility of his long survival. Come to think of it, looked at him. There's been another murder.
Are you treating this as murder, Mr. Taggart?
You're treating it as suspicious death.
How did she die?
Now, you know I can't tell you that yet.
Very few TV detectives do tend to be flash, actually. If anything, it's the complete reversal of it.
Yeah, fine.
Having an air of dishevelled behaviour about them makes detectives a lot more interesting.
What did he use? Brick. Came from here.
If they've been spending so much time looking after their own appearance, dressing in the nicest suits, I think we'd have a lot less faith and belief in them that they'd be able to cut through all of the nonsense that's portrayed to them and find who the real killer is.
Never wear a suit that you wouldn't be happy letting a drunk be sick over.
People involved in British entertainment don't feel that they have any credibility unless they're reflecting the real world. The real world in Britain is pretty universally grim, gritty and depressing, and that's why we get TV shows that reflect that. And that's why when you occasionally get a show like Bergerac, it's so stunning, because it's so different.
Midsummer Murders' John Nettles' previous incarnation as Jim Bergerac bucked the trend.
Thank you.
Proving that in the glossy 80s, at least you could get your hands dirty in the grubby world of crime and still look cool.
He was wonderfully, I like to think, charismatic.
I turned him down. The poor man had to eat with somebody.
Susan. This great gap of time since I played him, we turned over on that 28 years ago.
Jim, Barney here. Do you read me?
You often saw him driving around the wonderful, picturesque streets of Jersey in a brilliant red sports car. All of the housewives at home thought he was fantastic.
Lots of women think John Thor's very attractive in a rumpled, grumpy sort of way.
John Thor's portrayal of the grumpy old inspector was pitch perfect and gave author Colin Dexter's creation credibility as the cultured and crossword-obsessed Morse.
We had the enormous good fortune from the word go of having dear old John.
An impotent husband and a pretty au pair, a doting gardener and a jealous chatelaine.
I liked Morse, and I liked it for one reason, and it was envy. The Jag drives up, stops, door opens, Morse gets out, camera pans, walking right the way up the path. Taggart, not a chance. They had an hour-long programme in 2 hours. It was a joy to watch.
What the? Full marks for image and style, but the road holding could be better. Question: does a detective need an accomplice? Why do so many have an often useless sidekick?
Most of the